Hey guys, Ms. Davis here. You are currently watching Unit 10 Skill 2 video, which is arc length. So take a minute to pause, write down the essential question. How do I solve circle questions involving central angles and arc length? Okay. All right, so the formula that you need to know for arc length is going to be this formula here that is kind of like, if you've heard of like a percent over 100 equals part over whole type idea, it really is like part over whole equals part over whole. But this symbol, we got the angle or the central angle in the picture over 360, because 360 is the full degree measure around a circle. And then the arc length is going to be just this little outside edge that is open to, or that the central angle is open to. So this little pink highlighted piece is called the arc length, and then the circumference is the whole circle all the way around the outside. So it's really like part angle over full angle equals part arc over full arc. Okay, and something that we want to make sure that we know is that arc length, we're going to be using usually the symbol L for arc length, and then the circumference. Let's write it down here. So the circumference is the distance around a full circle, and the formula, you can write it one of two different ways. It's either pi times d, which is the diameter, which is what I usually use just because it's a little bit less of a step. So d is the diameter of the circle, which is all the way across. Or you can think of it as c equals, that's ugly, 2 times pi times the radius, because 2 times r is going to give you the diameter anyways, so r would be the radius. But I usually use pi times d, so you'll also see me write this formula as L over pi times the diameter, which is just the circumference. Okay, so the steps in solving these types of problems are to first find the circumference of the circle and then use the proportion up above to solve it. So here we go. Example 1, let's jump right in. It says determine the arc length. So we're going to be finding the L. Okay, and leave your answer in terms of pi. So when it says to leave your answer in terms of pi, this is new for you guys. So I'm going to pause the video and write something down on the outside here. Okay, so this in terms of pi I just wrote off to the side. If it says that specifically, that means don't calculate with the pi. Leave it in your answer. And you're going to see what I mean in a second, but that just means leave it on the paper. Don't put it in the calculator. Okay, so here we go. We've got angle over 360 equals arc length over pi times d, which is the circumference. Okay, so our central angle that they give us is 90, so there's our angle. So it'll be 90 over 360 equals, our arc length is what we're solving for, over our circumference. So we need to know what the diameter is. Right now we know that r is equal to 12, so our diameter is going to be 24, because you're just going to double the 12. So I'm going to write it, I usually write the number first in front of the pi, so it'll be 24 times pi as the circumference. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and cross multiply, and we're going to go 360 times L, 360L equals. Now when we actually do this way, all we're typing into our calculator is 90 times 24. Don't put the pi in the calculator, and when we just multiply those two numbers together, we get 2,160. Okay, so I'm going to get 2,160 pi. All right, you just tack it on the end there because it does have a numerical value, but we want to leave it just in terms of it. And then our last step to get rid of, or to get our L by itself, is to divide both sides by the 360. And when we type this in the calculator, you're only typing in this right here. Again, you're leaving the pi out. So we're going to end up with L is equal to, when we divide those two numbers, we get 6. So it'll be 6 pi. So that is our final answer if we leave it in terms of pi. Now, if I actually calculated 6 times pi, which is like 3.1415 and so forth, you end up with an actual numerical value of 18.84 something. Okay, so that is if they said round your answer to the nearest tenth or to the nearest foot like the next one does. But this one doesn't want your answer rounded. They just want this times pi, which is really the most accurate representation of the answer because it's not rounded. All right, example number 2. There's no picture, so it is helpful to draw a picture when they don't give you one. So let's go ahead and start here. If a circle with a radius of 12, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle. And there's a center with a radius of 12, so you're only going halfway. Find the arc length that would be formed by a central angle of 225. Okay, so 225 is almost it's a pretty large arc. So I'm going to draw my piece of my pie there just like that, my sector. But the actual, and again, this really doesn't matter. It's not going to be graded. But just so you know that 225 degrees is going to be more like this arc right here. So 225 degrees is going to be our angle. And then we have our radius labeled as 12, okay? So again, our formula is going to be the angle over 360 equals the arc length over pi times the diameter. Wow. Okay, so our angle given to us is 225 over 360 equals our arc length, which we're solving for, over pi times the diameter. So again, the diameter is going to be 12 times 2, which it just so happens that our diameter is, again, 24. So 24 pi. Okay, but this time they want it rounded to the nearest foot. So what this means, that you're going to multiply by pi to get your final answer. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and cross multiply. So we get 360L equals, I still don't multiply by pi until the very last step. So if I did do my cross multiplication of just 225 and 24, I get 5,400 pi, and then divide both sides by 360, divide both sides by 360. And what we end up with is length, arc length here is going to equal, and if I just divide these two, it ends up becoming 15 pi. But again, since it says to the nearest foot, we're going to go ahead and multiply 15 times pi in our calculator, which is going to end up becoming 47.1238 and so forth. But nearest foot is going to be nearest whole number. So we're looking at the 7, and the 7 is going to be kept the same. So it's going to round to 47 feet. Okay. All right. So go ahead and flip on over to the next side. And example 3. So again, no picture does help to draw a picture. So if a circle with a radius of 3 feet, so here's our circle, center out, our radius of 3, and an arc whose length is 2 feet. Okay, so now we're asked to find the central angle. So we're going to draw a line from there to there, and we're going to be solving for the angle. So I'm going to put X in there. And our arc length is 2 feet. So I'm going to put 2 feet is the length from here to there. Okay, so we have been given L. We have our radius, which means that our diameter is 3 times 2 is 6. And then we can plug in to find our angle. So I'm going to start off with the formula. Angle over 360 equals length over pi times d. All right, so we're finding the angle. So x over 360 equals our arc length is 2 over our diameter is 6 times pi. All right, crisscross, multiply. And it says to round to the nearest tenth of a degree. So we're going to be eventually multiplying by the pi. All right, so 360 times 2 is 720 equals, so we're going to have 6 pi x here. So 6 pi times x. Okay, and if our goal is to get x by itself, I'm just going to divide both sides by 6 pi to get those guys to cancel out. They're both gone, the 6 and the pi, and we are left with x equals, and if we type this whole thing right into our calculator, that ends up becoming 38 0.204. And again, nearest tenth of a degree, we're going to round because we've already divided by pi. We've calculated with pi. So our nearest tenth place is the 2. The number that comes after the 2 is a 0. So we're rounding to 38.2 degrees because it is a central angle. All right. Next problem. Example 4, if a circle has a central angle of 280 degrees, so again, that's another big circle, and they're giving us the arc length. So I'm going to draw the center, and the degree that they give us for the angle is 280, so it's going to be this big angle in there, so 280 is the angle, and the arc length is 14 pi, which means that if we're following this blue angle here, then that means from here, where the angle starts, all the way around, this arc length, all the way around the outside, is 14 pi. So that's our L. What is the circumference of the circle? So we are going to be finding what pi times the diameter is. Okay, so we're going to be finding the circumference. So again, let's write down our formula real quick. Angle over 360 equals arc length over pi times d, which is the circumference. All right, so we have 280 degrees over 360 equals, our arc length is 14 pi, divided by, I'm going to call this whole thing x, because that is our circumference. Okay? All right, now cross multiply, and we get 280x equals, let's see, 5,040 pi. All right, so I just multiplied the 360 times the 14 and tacked the pi on, and then divide both sides. It just kind of saves you from writing a ton of decimals out, because every time you multiply by pi, it gives you an endless amount of decimals. So it just kind of saves you to do it all in one step rather than writing them all out each step. So x equals, now I'm going to type in first just the fraction here, and when I divide those two, I get 18. But remember, we have the pi, so it's 18 times pi, and we got to see, do they want us to leave it in terms of pi, or do they want us to round? It says to the nearest tenth. So if it said round to the if it said leave your answer in terms of pi, this would be acceptable, 18 pi. But since they want you to round, it's going to be x equals, when you multiply those in your calculator, you get 56.547. And then now we just have to do that extra step and round and get x equals 56.5. Okay, so that would be your circumference of the circle. And then the last one here, another draw picture. So a circle has a central angle of 90 degrees. All right, center 90 degrees. And let's label that. Intercepts an arc whose length is 18 pi. So that means from here to here on the outside, or the edge of the circle, is 18 pi. What is the diameter of the circle? So we're going to plug in everything that we know to our formula. Pi times d, except for the diameter. Okay, so our angle we know is 90 over 360 equals, our arc length is 18 pi, so I'm going to plug in 18 pi all over our diameter, which we don't know, so pi times the diameter. At this step, before I even cross multiply, if I have a pi on the top and a pi on the bottom of a fraction, I can cancel it, because pi divided by pi is just 1 over 1, which is really, you don't have to write the ones in. So you can just cross multiply without the pi's in there. So I'm going to do 90 times d is 90d, equals 360 times 18 is 6,480. And then just divide both sides by 90. And we get that the diameter is equal to 72. Okay, so that's about it for arc length. If you could take a minute to pause and write your summary, and then go ahead and start your practice.